That's all it is, right? A small copper coin, something you drop in a parking lot and don't bother picking up. Something that collects dust in a jar on your dresser for years without you ever giving it a second thought. But what if I told you that a single penny, just one, sold at auction for $16,800? What if I told you that this tiny coin was born in one of the most dramatic years in American history, a year when 16 million soldiers came home from the deadliest war the world had ever seen, a year when a whole nation held its breath and asked, "What now?" That coin is the 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny. And today we're going to tell its full story. We're going to talk about where it came from, what makes it special, how to tell the difference between a common one and a rare one, and why some of these pennies are worth thousands of dollars right now. So get comfortable. This is not just a coin video. This is a story about America, about survival, about hope, and about one very small piece of copper that carries a whole lot of history in its hands. Let's go. To understand the 1946 penny, you first have to understand 1946 itself. The year before, in 1945, the United States and its allies had finally defeated Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. World War II was over. After nearly 4 years of fighting, after more than 400,000 American deaths, after years of rationing, sacrifice, and fear, it was finally done. The war ended in September 1945, and then, almost overnight, everything changed. Soldiers started coming home, 16 million of them pouring back into American cities and towns across the country. These were young men who had spent years in jungles, on beaches, in the freezing cold of Europe. They came home to their families, to their girlfriends and wives, to a country they had missed desperately. And America was ready to celebrate. In 1946, 3.4 million Barbies were born, a 20% increase over 1945. This was the beginning of the baby boom, a demographic wave that would define American society for the next 2 decades. After years of wartime sacrifice, Americans found good jobs with rising wages, bought their first homes, and enjoyed better living standards than their parents ever had. But it wasn't all perfect. The transition was scary for a lot of people. In the summer of 1945, as the war drew to a close, many experts had serious doubts about whether the U.S. economy could make the shift from a full war economy to a stable peacetime one. During the war, the government had controlled almost everything: what factories made, what people could buy, what things cost. There was rationing on meat, on sugar, on gasoline, on shoes. Americans had gone years without being able to buy a new car because the factories were making tanks and planes instead. By the end of 1946, direct government control of resources, including price controls and rationing schemes, was essentially eliminated. The economy opened up, and what happened next surprised everyone. After half a decade of rationing and war privation, Americans were more than ready to spend. Industries pivoted faster than anyone expected, shifting from producing bomber jets and tanks to cars, televisions, and home appliances. People were buying things again, real things, fun things, things that had nothing to do with war. And right in the middle of all this, in the middle of this explosion of hope and energy and new beginnings, the United States Mint got back to work. Now let's talk about the coin itself. The 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny is a 1-cent coin. It measures 19 millimeters across, just under 3/4 of an inch. It weighs 3.11 grams. It has a smooth edge, no ridges, and it's made of 95% copper, with the remaining 5% being a mix of tin and zinc. That copper composition matters more than you might think. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. On the front of the coin, you see the face of Abraham Lincoln. He's looking to the right, his profile sharp and dignified. Above his head in an arc, the words "In God We Trust." To the left of his portrait, the word "Liberty." And below the date, depending on which mint made the coin, you may or may not see a small letter. That small letter is called a mint mark. and it tells you exactly where this coin was born. On the back of the coin, you see two wheat stalks, one on each side, framing the words 1 cent and United States of America. Above that, the national motto, EPLURBUSUNUM, out of many, one. This design had been on the American penny since 1909. That's the year the Lincoln cent was first introduced, created by a sculptor named Victor David Brenner to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was actually a historic moment in U.S. coinage, because before 1909, American coins almost never featured a real person's face. Lincoln broke that tradition, and the design stuck. By 1946, this penny had been in people's pockets for 37 years. It was familiar, it was trusted, and in 1946, it carried a very specific kind of weight. Here's something most people don't know about the 1946 penny. The copper used to make, it wasn't just regular copper. During World War II, the U.S. military had fired billions of rounds of artillery shells and naval ammunition. Brass and copper shell casings from all that firepower were collected after the war. And in 1944, 1945, and 1946, some of that recovered metal, copper salvaged from spent military shell casings, went directly into making pennies. Think about that for a second. The same copper that had been loaded into a naval gun in the Pacific Ocean, fired into a battle, and then recovered afterward, might be sitting right there on the surface of a 1946 Lincoln cent. This coin is literally made of war material. It carries the physical remnants of the conflict that had just ended. That's not something you get with most coins, that's something extraordinary. Now let's talk about where these coins were made, because location matters a great deal when you're talking about value. In 1946, 3 U.S. mint facilities produced Lincoln cents: Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, Denver in Colorado, and San Francisco in California. Philadelphia was the big one. The Philadelphia Mint produced 991,655,000 pennies in 1946, almost 1 billion coins just from that one facility. Philadelphia coins have no mint mark. There's no letter below the date. If you look at a 1946 penny and see nothing under the 1946, that coin was made in Philadelphia. Denver produced 315,690,000 coins. Denver pennies carry a small d beneath the date. San Francisco produced 198,100,000 coins. San Francisco pennies carry an S. Let's add all three together and you get over 1.5 billion pennies made in a single year. That's an enormous number. And it means that most 1946 pennies in circulated condition, the ones that were actually used as money, passed from hand to hand, spent in stores and dropped in change jars, are not particularly rare. A typical 1946 wheat penny in average used condition is worth somewhere between 5 cents and 50 cents today. But that's just the beginning of the story. The value of a 1946 penny doesn't just depend on which mint made it. It depends on condition. It depends on color. It depends on whether the coin was ever circulated. And it depends on something that can turn a 5-cent coin into a $5,000 coin overnight. But before we get to errors, let's talk about grading, because if you ever want to know what your penny is truly worth, you need to understand how coin graders think. Coin grading is a standardized system that assigns a number to a coin based on its condition. The scale runs from 1, which is barely identifiable as a coin, all the way up to 70, which is perfect. A coin that scores 70 has absolutely no marks, no scratches, no imperfections of any kind under magnification. It looks exactly as it did the second it left the mint press. Most coins that ever circulated that were actually used as money score somewhere between 1 and 58. These are called circulated grades. Coins that were never spent, that went from the mint directly into storage and stayed there, are called mint state coins. They score from 60 to 70. For the 1946 penny, a circulated coin in average condition, let's say a grade of fine or very fine, is worth maybe 10 to 25 cents. Nothing exciting there. But here's where it gets interesting. A 1946 Philadelphia penny in mint state 65 condition is worth around $5 to $25. The same coin in mint state 67 jumps to several $100s. And an MS-67 Plus example, one of the finest known, sold at Heritage Auctions in December 2022 for $16,800. Same coin, same design, same year. The only difference is condition. That's the power of grade. Now there's another factor that affects the value of a 1946 penny beyond just the grade. Its color. Copper changes over time. When a brand new penny comes out of the mint press, it's a bright, shiny red-orange color, like a fresh copper pipe. That's called red, abbreviated RD. Over months and years, copper naturally oxidizes. It slowly shifts from bright red to a mix of red and brown. That's called red-brown, abbreviated RB. And over decades, especially if the coin was handled or exposed to moisture, copper turns fully brown. That's called brown, abbreviated BN. In terms of value, red is king. A 1946 penny graded MS-65 red can be worth 10 times more than the exact same grade in brown. Collectors want to see that original mint luster, that bright copper color that says this coin has barely been touched since the day it was made. If you find a 1946 penny that still has its original red color and has never been circulated, you're holding something special. So we've talked about condition and color. Now let's talk about the thing that can turn an ordinary 1946 penny into something truly extraordinary. Errors. Mint errors happen when something goes wrong during the coin-making process. Maybe the die, the metal stamp used to press the design into the coin, is misaligned. Maybe it strikes the coin twice at slightly different angles. Maybe the coin blank isn't properly centered when the press hits it. These accidents happen, and when they do, they create coins that are unlike any other coins in existence. Error coins are rare by definition. You can't manufacture one on purpose. They happen by accident, and most of the time, quality control catches them before they leave the mint. But some slip through, and those are the ones collectors hunt for. For the 1946 penny, there are several known errors worth knowing about. The first is the doubled die. This happens when the die strikes the coin blank twice, but the two strikes are at slightly different angles. The result is a coin where certain letters or numbers appear doubled or blurry. On a 1946 penny with a doubled die, you might see doubling in the word liberty, or in the date itself, or in the phrase "In God We Trust." If you look closely and see what appears to be a slight shadow or echo behind any of the letters, you might have a doubled die. These can be worth anywhere from $20 to $150 or more, depending on how prominent the doubling is and what condition the coin is in. The second error type is the off-center strike. This is exactly what it sounds like. The coin blank wasn't properly centered when the press came down, so the design landed off to one side. Part of the coin's edge has no design on it at all. The more off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin. A minor off-center strike of 5 to 10% might add $10 to $50 to the value. A dramatic off-center strike where the coin is 50% or more off-center can be worth $500 to over $1,000. The third error is the die crack or cud. Over time, the metal dies used to stamp coins can develop cracks. These cracks show up on the coins as raised lines or lumps on the surface. A small die crack might add a few dollars to a coin's value. A large cud, which is a raised blob of metal at the coin's rim caused by a chunk breaking off the die, can add $50 to $150. But none of these are the most famous error on a 1946 penny. The most legendary error associated with the 1946 Lincoln cent is the S over D variety. Here's what happened. The U.S. Mint in San Francisco needed working dies to stamp coins. Normally, a San Francisco die would have the letter S punched into it, but somehow, at least one die that had already been stamped with a D for Denver was then overpunched with an S for San Francisco. The D wasn't completely erased. Traces of it remained underneath the S. That die then went into production. It struck real coins that went into circulation. And those coins, if you look carefully at the mint mark under magnification, show something no other 1946 penny shows. You can see the ghost of a D inside and around the S. The bottom curve of the S appears connected by a thin line to the middle, because part of the D is still visible underneath. This is called an overmintmark variety, sometimes written as S over D or S/D. It's one of the most popular overmintmark varieties in the entire Lincoln Cent series. Collectors have been hunting for it for decades. In circulated condition, an S over D 1946 penny is worth somewhere between $11 and $144. In uncirculated condition, it can reach $260 to over $460. And the auction record for this variety, a high-grade certified example, sold for $3,181 for a penny, 1 cent face value. $3,181 realized at auction. That's the magic of the 1946 S over D. Now, let's talk about another era that's less famous, but just as fascinating to coin collectors. The 1946 S with an inverted mint mark. On a normal coin, the S mint mark sits in a standard upright position below the date. But on a small number of 1946 San Francisco pennies, the mint mark was punched into the die upside down and then corrected. The correction wasn't perfect. Traces of the inverted S remain visible. In high mint state condition, this variety, catalogued by specialists as FS501, has sold for over $468. Again, a penny. Let me ask you something. How many pennies have you thrown away in your life? Dropped in a tip jar, left on a counter, tossed in a junk drawer and forgotten? Most of us don't think twice about a penny. But here's the thing. Wheat pennies, the ones with the wheat stalks on the back instead of the Lincoln Memorial, stopped being made in 1958. That means every single wheat penny still out there is at least 67 years old. Some of them are still circulating in change jars and old collections right now, and you can still find them. People find wheat pennies in coin rolls from banks. They find them in estate sales when a grandparent's old coin jar gets sorted out. They find them in old piggy banks, in the backs of drawers, in boxes of stuff that sat in an attic for 40 years. A 1946 wheat penny with a fresh red surface and no circulation wear is not common. The reason high-grade examples are worth so much money is that most 1946 pennies were used. They went into pockets and purses and cash registers. They got worn down. Most of the ones that survived in perfect condition did so by accident, by being set aside and forgotten in exactly the right conditions. So if you're going through a coin collection, an estate sale find, or even a box of old stuff at a garage sale, don't walk past those wheat pennies without looking at them closely. Let's talk about how to examine a 1946 penny if you have one. First, look at the mint mark. It's on the front of the coin, the obverse just below the date. Nothing there means Philadelphia. A D means Denver. An S means San Francisco. If you see an S, get a magnifying glass. A 5 times magnifier is enough. Look carefully at the S. Does it look perfectly clean and sharp? Or do you see something underneath it, a shadow, a curve that doesn't quite belong to the S shape? If you do, you might be looking at the S over D variety. Second, look at the condition. Is the coin shiny or dull? Is the copper still red-orange, or has it turned brown? Are Lincoln's features sharp and defined, or worn down and flat? Condition determines value more than almost anything else. Third, look for any obvious errors. Is the design centered, or does it seem to lean to one side with a blank crescent of metal on the opposite edge? That could be an off-center strike. Are any letters or numbers appearing doubled or ghostly? That could be a doubled die. Are there any raised lines running across the surface? That could be a die crack. Fourth, look at the surfaces. Has anyone cleaned this coin? Cleaning is one of the worst things that can happen to a collectible coin. A cleaned coin loses its natural surface, and collectors can almost always tell. The metal looks too bright, too uniform, or shows hairline scratches from the cleaning process. A cleaned coin, even one in otherwise excellent condition, is worth significantly less than an original uncleaned example. If you think you have something special, the next step is getting it professionally graded. The two most trusted grading services in the United States are PCGS, the Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation. Both services examine coins under controlled conditions, assign them an official grade, and seal them in a tamper-evident holder with their certification. A PCGS or NGC certified coin is much easier to sell and almost always worth more than a raw ungraded coin of the same quality. let's step back for a moment and think about what this coin actually represents. 1946 was the first full year of normal peacetime coin production after World War II. The mints had spent years producing coins under wartime conditions, including a period in 1943 when pennies were made of zinc-coated steel instead of copper, because copper was needed for ammunition. In 1944 and 1945, some of that recovered shell case copper went into the coins. By 1946, things were stabilizing. The war was over. The economy was finding its footing. America was rebuilding, expanding, dreaming bigger than it had in a long time, and the penny reflected all of that. It was made of copper again, real copper, some of it recycled from the very weapons that had won the war. It carried the face of Abraham Lincoln, the president who had held the country together through its greatest internal crisis 80 years earlier. And it was made in vast numbers, over 1.5 billion of them, because the American economy was roaring back to life and people needed money to spend. Every single one of those coins passed through real American hands. A soldier buying a cup of coffee on his first day back in the States. A young mother buying groceries for her growing family. A factory worker getting change back from his lunch break. A kid at a candy counter, carefully counting out his pennies. These coins lived in the real world. They were part of real lives. Most of them are gone now, melted down or lost or worn beyond recognition. But some of them survived. And those survivors carry something with them that no modern coin can replicate. They carry 1946. Let's talk about how to build a collection around the 1946 penny if you're interested in getting started. The most natural approach is to collect one example from each of the three main mints. One Philadelphia, one Denver, one San Francisco. In circulated condition, you can put together this basic 3-coin set for well under $5. It's one of the most affordable entry points in all of American coin collecting. From there, you can aim for better condition. Try to find examples that are uncirculated or close to it. Look for coins with some original red color remaining. You'll pay more, but the coins will be more satisfying to own and will hold their value better over time. If you want to go deeper, hunt for the S over D variety. It's not easy to find, but it's not impossibly rare either. Patient searching through coin rolls, estate sales, and dealer stock can turn one up. When you find one, even in circulated condition, it's genuinely exciting. And if you really want to go all in, aim for a high-grade red certified example from a major grading service. These are serious collector coins, worth hundreds to thousands of dollars, and they represent the finest survivors of a coin that was produced in enormous quantities 80 years ago. Whatever level you collect at, the 1946 wheat penny rewards attention. The more you know about it, the more interesting it becomes. Here's something worth sitting with for a minute. When that 1946 penny was struck, probably sometime in the first few months of that year, a worker at the mint loaded a copper planchet, a small blank disc of metal, into a coin press. The press came down with thousands of pounds of force. In a fraction of a second, Abraham Lincoln's face appeared on one side, wheat stalks appeared on the other, and a new coin came into existence. That coin didn't know it was going to be worth $16,000 someday. It didn't know it was going to be examined under magnification, certified by experts, and sold at auction 80 years later. It was just a penny, 1 cent, but everything that happened to it from that moment forward, whether it was spent or saved, worn down or kept bright, lost or discovered, that's what determined what it's worth today. The best 1946 pennies in existence right now, the MS-67 red gems that sell for thousands of dollars, survived because someone at some point set them aside. Maybe they pulled a bright shiny penny out of their change and thought it looked too nice to spend. Maybe a mint employee grabbed a handful of fresh coins as a souvenir. Maybe a coin roll ended up in the back of a safe and was never touched again. Nobody planned for those coins to be worth what they are today. It just happened. Time passed, the coins got rarer, and the ones that had been treated well became genuinely extraordinary. So let's wrap this up. The 1946 Lincoln wheat penny is not the rarest coin in American history. It's not the most valuable. With over 1.5 billion made, you're never going to mistake it for a truly scarce issue, but it is something special. It's the coin of a turning point. The first full year after the most devastating war in human history. The beginning of the baby boom, the suburban explosion, the American economic miracle that would reshape the world over the next 20 years. It's made partly of copper that once served in wartime weapons. It carries the face of the president who defined American resilience. And it exists in enough variety, 3 mints, multiple error types, a range of conditions from well-worn to gem-perfect, that it offers something for every kind of collector. If you have a jar of old coins somewhere in your house, go find it. Pull out the wheat pennies, look at the backs. If you see wheat stalks instead of the Lincoln Memorial, you're holding a coin from before 1959. Check the date. If it says 1946, turn it over, check for a mint mark, get a magnifier, and look carefully. You might be holding something very ordinary, or you might be holding something that a serious collector would pay good money for. Either way, now you know the story. You know where it came from, what it means, and why people care about it. 1 cent. 80 years of history. Not bad for a coin most people don't bother picking up off the ground. Thanks for watching. If you found this video useful, hit subscribe because there are a lot more coins with stories like this one. And if you have a 1946 penny sitting somewhere, let us know in the comments what you found. You might just surprise yourself.